we're replacing people with AI, and now your team is kind of in this state of like, well, what does that mean for my job, or what am I doing? It's powerful to reframe that narrative a little bit with owners who maybe don't have that perspective. Will AI end up replacing my employees? And then I kind of pose the question of, well, could you take your current team and scale your business to twice the size it is using the same amount of people you have now, enabled with the right AI tools?
I don't believe in AI readiness assessments. With AI readiness assessments, a lot of the time, most companies don't have good knowledge management. A lot of companies don't have their workflows mapped. They have no idea what their governance is. And I actually fundamentally disagree that disqualifies them from being able to begin to adopt AI.
What's left when the dust clears? What's left past the loud cheers? What's left? We're pulling at the threads to see what's left under every hot take, every belief. Leaning, we're cutting through the noise, the mess. What's next starts right here on What's Left. Hey!
Welcome back, everybody, to What's Left, where we talk with founders, builders, and leadership teams from different industries to understand the core question: if AI can do everything we can do, what's left? Today, we're joined by Stephen Whitten from Logo Strategy. Stephen, can you introduce yourself, please?
Yeah, so I'm founder of Logo Strategy Co. We work with small to mid-sized service or operational companies from an AI consulting or implementation standpoint. We're working on building what we call a business brain, which is essentially a context layer or a semantic layer that feeds from the data within a company, both structured and unstructured data, and then works as a governing layer for AI systems that they're building on top. So we approach our engagements both from just kind of the AI adoption, consulting standpoint, and then also trying to help companies implement the right AI systems with governed intelligence as kind of the main framework there.
Awesome. So this is very similar to what Casca AI Consulting is also focusing on. And to kind of kick things off, I'd love to hear why this space? What inspired you to found this company?
I have over 10 years of experience working with small to mid-sized service businesses and running into a lot of the same pain points. A lot of my background is from a marketing or branding standpoint, and there's a lot of just from a strategic standpoint where businesses are trying to make decisions, trying to work in really competitive markets sometimes where they're bumping up a lot against a lot of competitors for the same leads. About 2 years ago, pretty soon after ChatGPT came out with its first model, I was building custom ChatGPT just for like content marketing and trying to help businesses with building systems where they could generate more content. But then I quickly realized after using AI for really not very long that even back then, it really wasn't very good in terms of the content it was putting out. And so even within the world of SEO or ads, you have to be very careful about the content you're putting out. And so quickly realized that governance or context was a really important piece in the whole equation of AI. So I've spent actually about 1.5 years now really digging deep into that concept and really trying to understand that if we're going to try and install AI systems for companies, even if it's Claude or ChatGPT, whatever the system might be, there's a simple, let's just go in, install it, give everyone access, let them run, free and do whatever they want. Or there's a structured approach of what projects are we setting up? What context documents are we putting into the system? Is there an AI usage policy in place? Just really asking some of those questions of what does the AI actually know about your business? And, even within Claude's framework, it has memory, but that memory is somewhat selective and you really don't have any governance over what it actually remembers. So you could go on a rabbit hole and talk about something, and then all of a sudden, 3 chats later, it's bringing up that as context. And you're like, no, actually, that's like an old idea. We don't really want that to be part of the context I'm talking about now. So really figuring out how to help companies work within these AI environments in a very structured way.
I actually never knew how you were working on custom GPTs around the same time. When they first came out, it was towards the end of 2023, and the talk was, oh, it's the new app store.
Mm-hmm.
That never happened.
No.
But I was in a very similar position where we were all, or it was just me at that time. I built my first custom GPT and I went to a couple of my friends who are either solopreneurs or founders. I was like, what do you think about this? Like, what would this do for your business? And they're all either small and mid-sized businesses. We found a lot of value in them. The reason why I ended up starting Costco is because I had this hypothesis where it might be possible to provide kind of McKinsey level service and consulting to these small to mid-sized businesses. And I love to hear that you're in a very similar mind space. And I also love to hear that you quickly realize that content with, especially back then, with those models was very hard.
Yeah.
I'd love to hear now kind of big picture wise, right? When we look at the landscape and kind of all the enterprises that are out there, I think just yesterday, Adobe had laid off. I think it was like 13, 15%. It was like, I forget the exact number, but with all these layoffs and a lot of them attributing to AI, what are you hearing from your clients in the mid-sized industry right now?
Fresh on my mind, had a meeting with an owner of a mid-sized company this morning, and we got into this conversation. He was telling me about his really philosophy of being a business owner, and he's been a business owner for over 25 years. He's kind of the source of a lot of the success of his business. And part of his philosophy was treat my people well, treat my vendors well, treat my clients well. And like, that's what I've built my success on. And so we got into the conversation of, okay, like, how does that translate into AI and what the message is from that enterprise level? So there's these big companies that are doing these mass layoffs. From my kind of limited knowledge of why they're making those decisions, I think maybe part of it is that those big enterprise companies have really strong infrastructures, like digital infrastructures. And so they can implement agents that automate certain tasks that maybe are replacing certain job titles. But in a small to mid-sized company, the digital infrastructure or even the operational complexity of a lot of the projects that are or the workflows that are being done in those size companies, they still require a lot of human judgment and a lot of human oversight. So even if you are installing, let's say, an agentic framework for your sales department, and it's doing a lot of cold outreach, if that cold outreach isn't aligned with your brand, could be 6 months, a year, 2 years before you realize that you've really like decreased the value of your business by hurting your brand through agents that aren't aligned with your core mission or vision or values. And then, you've already kind of started this cultural message of we're replacing people with AI. And now your team is kind of in this state of like, well, what does that mean for my job or what am I doing? So I think it's really powerful to reframe that narrative a little bit with owners who maybe don't have that perspective. I've been on some conversations with owners where they are kind of bringing up that like, will AI end up replacing my employees? And then I kind of pose the question of, well, could you take your current team and scale your business to twice the size it is using the same amount of people you have now, enabled with the right AI tools? And then you're teaching them skills that they can take to their next job or make your business more valuable, and really trying to frame the conversation around how do you enable your team to be more effective in their roles using AI?
Yeah, I could not agree with that more. I in here internally we have a lot of conversations of like who is the right client for us, and a lot of it revolves around the leadership and the culture that they've established. Right, we will actively not work with someone who's looking to cut. One, from just kind of an ethics point of view, but two, they're probably going to need to hire those people back. We also work with those mid-sized teams, and any person that they lose is like a huge loss in capacity, right? And I like how you phrase it of, can we unlock capacity to get to that 2x growth with the same amount of people? I think it makes a whole lot of sense. You briefly mentioned in the enterprise side of things that, they may have the infrastructure to build out more of this agentic workflows and features. What do you think for mid-sized companies? What's the opportunity for them today in this landscape?
So the way that we're approaching this is going in and helping. We start with an AI readiness assessment. So we have a score of, where is your data at? Is the leadership team aligned? What do your systems look like? how many processes have you documented? What policies do you have in place? And really helping them understand that implementing AI, there's really a lot, like it's a very broad landscape. So there's a lot of ways to approach it. But when we go into a company, helping them understand that something just like the practice of documenting processes could be the largest AI opportunity that they have in the next year to 2 years. Because then every single documented process becomes a workflow or an agent opportunity within the right system or the right framework. So, really documenting tacit knowledge from the leadership team on down. So, we go and do structured, what I call intelligence mapping sessions, but this is with the whole leadership team or individuals within the team and really uncovering what they know, how they do it, why they make the decisions that they make. None of that information can be found in a database. And it's very important in terms of when we're thinking about governance within AI systems that it's aligned with that tacit knowledge that really is only extracted through those types of conversations.
I've never heard this structured intelligence mapping. I really like that phrase. I may have to steal it from you. Again, I love how you're approaching this because we always talk about in any system, even just a workflow, that there's some sort of input logic in the middle and then some sort of output. And if a team has no idea what any one of those three is, you're not going to be able to introduce AI. You're not going to be able to introduce automation. And like you said, it's like the amount of time to identify the right information, the right knowledge, and capture it, and then kind of take action with it. It could take a year, right? Depending on the system. At the end of the day, I don't believe in AI readiness assessments. Like, honestly.
Yeah.
I actually think to me, it feels like wearing a Fitbit or a Whoop. I used to wear one, and it gets to a point where it's like, cool, I know I got a bad night's of sleep. So you're just going to tell me I got a bad night's of sleep. Or I know I don't have my steps in. So you're just going to tell me I need more steps. Great. I feel that with AI readiness assessments, a lot of the time, most companies don't have good knowledge management. A lot of companies don't have their workflows mapped. They have no idea what their governance is. And I actually fundamentally disagree that disqualifies them from being able to begin to adopt AI. I think we joke about it internally because for me, the two big questions are, do you have actual business objectives? And can we map AI initiatives to those business objectives? And the second question that I ask of the leadership team is are you ready to role model? And is your culture ready for that? To me, a lot of it is change management, and you can get through all of that knowledge management and all that fun stuff. But if the leadership team is not ready to step up, role model, share prompts, drive this new kind of culture and way of working, that is like the biggest readiness assessment for me. I'd love to hear your take on that, though.
Yeah, and I'll probably throw a question back to you too, because I'm interested in your perspective there. I think we align with what you just said about the leadership's objectives being an entry point. One of the first intelligence mapping sessions that I have with a company when we start an engagement is with the full leadership team, ideally, or maybe it's just the owner. And that's a strategy and planning session. And really the only purpose of that session is to define their business goals. Because I found within the small to mid-size, especially the small, but even in the mid-size, growth is always a goal, right? And increasing revenue, that's kind of a given. But there's also a lot of hidden goals that live within the leadership team in terms of like, how do we treat our team, or what is the culture that we're building? Some of those things are a little bit harder to uncover. So I think what you said there about like focusing on the leadership team and their adoption, I'm in alignment there. And I think that's a really good starting point. The readiness assessment is a tool that I use to expose maybe the areas of their business that need work in order to get them to what we could call an AI first company 5 years from now. What does your data infrastructure look like? How many processes do you have mapped? Is your leadership team aligned? And it's really just like a stale document. Like you said, it really doesn't have a lot of inherent value in terms of like producing results other than maybe helping the leadership team understand the components of what a AI first company might look like in the future. Do you feel like that's reframed kind of what you initially took as the AI readiness assessment, or would you still kind of push up against that and think that maybe that's not really useful at that point.
No, and it's in that framing, I actually agree with it. And because it is kind of a way to poke holes at the business to identify, okay, what are the opportunities? What are the departments that we may need to focus on? And, we do a similar thing. We call it our AI maturity index. So when I was referring to that AI readiness assessment, it's, if you go to some sort of consultant's website and it's like, oh, are you ready for AI? Fill out our form. That is what I'm
Okay.
very against. Where
Yeah.
it's like nobody in the leadership team is going to fill out your form, or they'll have somebody else fill it out, and then it's like, cool, we're not ready, so I guess we're just going to move on. But no, I do like how you reframed it. Of it can become scale really fast, and we look at our AI maturity. We actually map it at the beginning of the engagement, and we track it as time goes on. It's a very simple score, 1 out of 5, and with every kind of executive business review that we do, it's kind of like, where are we? It's a really great tool when you get to that 6-month mark or 12-month mark to have a really honest conversation with the client. So it is a very valuable tool, and keeping it fresh is challenging, as with anything, but it is also, you just have to do it at the right time.
Let's say, I mean, it could be AI first is what we're calling that, like, stage 5. You might call it something different. What would you envision a company looking like once they've reached that stage?
Yeah, great question. Well, a couple of things here. First, I'm going to go on a tangent. I actually hate the phrase AI first. The reason for that is the more businesses I worked with the more I realize is none of them want to be AI first. Nobody really wants to be AI first. It's just AI is just another tool, and it's how we reach those goals, right? For a business, it's either their mission first, their people first, their product or service first. Like, all this stuff comes before the AI. And the phrase that we like, or the term that we like to use, is AI co-working. And is it a ripoff from Cloud Co-work? Maybe, but does it make sense? Yes. To me, it makes sense, because that's truly the mindset we want to instill with anybody where we're doing fluency and adoption. You are co-working with AI. And that type of narrative really lends itself back to some of the things you're saying, empowering folks and really helping them kind of get a sidekick or a superpower that they work alongside with. But back to your question, for that kind of phase is stage 5, what does adoption look like there? I'll actually take a first step. For us, a company that's 3 out of 5, we call this the standardized phase, where it goes awareness, experimentation, standardization, then orchestration and building. Those are kind of the 5 main stages. And at 3, that's where you're standardizing AI use. We define this as 95% of your company is using an AI chat hub like Claude, Gemini, etc. once a week. 50+% are using it every single day. And those that are using it every single day, they're saving 1 hour a day on administrative tasks that they're now refocusing to more creative, strategic, and impactful work. That's kind of phase 1. And we really kind of stop at this 3 out of 5 mark. So then when we go to the full 5 out of 5, this is a phase where I think it is almost no companies are at. If there are very few. It's a state that we are trying to get to as a consultancy, as we kind of dog food our own hub and business brain and how humans and agents access all of our domain knowledge. But that stage, the KPI I would use there is 95% of the company is contributing code. Now, they're not committing the code, but I'm a big believer that subject matter experts, when they are the builders, they're the ones that are going to build the best workflow that you can imagine. But you have to teach them how to build, right? And Claude Code and Codex, etc., they're a huge unlock in that front, but there's still a lot to learn. But you mentioned it a couple of times, the governance and the ability to do that safely in an environment, that is the hard work that I think a lot of people are trying to figure out. So at this stage 5, you have a business that is operating where both humans and agents are able to access any domain knowledge. Things like recursive dreaming is happening at the end of every day, where all your Slacks, all your emails, all the new documents created are reconciled. And behind the scenes, you have a great kind of day by day update of the company. And that's just one example, right, out of many that you can have with that kind of business brain. But that's kind of how I envision it. I'd love to hear what might be your vision.
Yeah, so similar like stages, although I do use the word AI first, you might have me rethinking that, but I hear your point at least. But yeah, like AI aware and then AI equipped, AI
Mhm.
building, AI connected. AI first would be
Mhm.
our fifth stage. But so AI aware is like, okay, we know that we need AI. AI equipped is like, okay, we've set up our team cloud account, but that's it. AI building is like, okay, now we have, maybe an external team like one of our firms or someone internally that's really driving these initiatives, but there's somebody that's building, like actively
Mhm.
developing AI tools within the company or systems or agents. And then AI connected is where now our data infrastructure is connected into that business brain like we're talking about there. AI first is where now the company's actively running automations or agents, or there's at least a percentage of the company's work that is being done through automations. And so that's really, and then that just kind of evolves over time based on, what's been validated or what actually works. So I think what's interesting as I work with service or operational businesses, these are businesses who have never had a developer. They maybe have had contact with a data team, maybe just an IT team, and they really don't know what it looks like to do product development. So they're mostly project oriented and they have project managers, but they're not maybe familiar with like validation steps or even how to kind of develop a product over time, which is maybe why they reach out to a firm like ours where we help them through that process. But I'd be interested to hear your perspective because I I'm interested specifically on your vision of like everyone coding. I have a
Mhm.
couple of thoughts on that and maybe just like a little bit of pushback, but I'd
Yeah.
be interested in your perspective on that framework of people writing code or even companies developing AI within their company. What does that practically look like without it creating a lot of technical debt for whoever's managing all of those ideas coming in and trying to develop something that's actually architected in a way that's functional?
Yeah, really good question. My 95% is still a hypothesis. And I think when I first thought of this, I was over indexing on how much I love to build. And then I realized that not everybody loves to build, which is the first kind of cultural thing to think about. But to get deeper into your question, the way that we see this evolving is we have internally what we call kind of our vibe starter kit. And it's very basic repo. And in it, we're continuously kind of, again, recursively pushing back into it and everything we build for our hub. Our own internal hub is a repo where we can manage all of our clients' experience and they have a portal to log into.
Mhm.
So, and we are able to take things like map our data. So, a CRM, for example, our file structure, so our Google Drive, and then our conversations, we use Fellow now and have a place to essentially connect all three. Now, this is the core hub. And in it, we've been implementing a lot of skills, guardians, I'll probably get flamed, but a thoughtful Claude MD, where we are trying to make it so that if you are building something, there's a lot of rules for anybody's Claude code to follow. So even if you have a vanilla Claude code that you're using and you're building a new work tree in GitHub, it's as it's building, not only are we first teaching people how to research, plan, build, iterate, in terms of like how to build, but we're also having a lot of checkpoints in the actual pipeline that is adhering to how are they building the schema and is it kind of up to code, right? The hope is that the subject matter expert is going to take the time to iterate long enough to get it into like what I would call a minimum viable product. Is it merged with your main? Absolutely not. This is, I believe, the future, a huge future role for engineers is to build these types of factories where, there's rules and governance to how an AI agent is coding within it. But then two, making sure that they're doing all the checks and balances to maintain accountability, but the system can ingest any new workflow or feature that someone builds. To give you an example of this, one of the first tests I ran was, okay, we're looking to hire some folks, right? I didn't want to go out and buy a whole ATS system because I'm not going to use 95% of its features. I honestly just need to be able to have a very basic Kanban board, link a name to a Google Drive job description,
Mhm.
and drop in notes as they flow, right? We're building in a lot of the core infrastructure like data layers of, okay, here is our basic people layer and this is how it should be structured. The first question is, does this need to be integrated into your main people? It's hiring. So no, we're actually going to build a schema that exists outside of our main people layer. That's just for hiring because, future state, maybe like thinking too far ahead, you have 1,000 applicants. You don't want those 1,000 applicants in your main people relationship management. And so, cool, made it as a separate one. And Claude was asking me these questions like, where do you want this to live?
Mhm.
And so at the end of the day, I was able to spin up very simple, just hiring tracking system within our own hub. And our engineer reviewed it and pushed it. And so now I can collaborate with my team to say, like, okay, and we already have role level security of, okay, that feature is only for leadership,
Mhm.
for example. So there's a lot of core infrastructure that needs to be built in order to allow anyone to like vibe on top of. But that's kind of a manifestation of how I envision it coming together.
Yeah. I like what you said about where someone builds an MVP that gets submitted, and then you even have that governed environment that's already programmed in a way that it knows what product development is. So it's helping guide
Yes.
them, which anyone who's worked in, Claude Code or any coding environment with using AI, you can definitely direct it to the point of building roadmaps and even validating certain steps. But I like what you said about just creating that environment as a consistent environment across the whole company so that everybody's building kind of within that structured
Hmm.
framework. So I'm curious because you were talking about the kind of the role-based access or like
Hmm.
authentication within the system. I think this is like a really big question with these environments. And then you had mentioned something about with the business brain
Hmm.
how it's ingesting knowledge from all of these different sources, like let's say from the meeting transcripts or from
Hmm.
documents or emails, whatever sources you're giving that as kind of the core data or the unstructured data that's feeding into this business brain. One of the questions we're working to solve currently is how to govern that so that like if all of that's being ingested and let's say someone in like management level has access to all of this
Hmm.
information, there might be things talked about on meetings. Let's say it's an HR related topic, or let's say someone's pitching an idea and they don't want someone else to take credit for it. Like
Hmm.
maybe there's a lot of scenarios here, but have you given any thought to how to structure kind of the information or the knowledge that's being ingested in a way that there's kind of role-based access around what knowledge is actually accessible to each person on the team?
Lots. Do I have an answer? I think the current working theory that we have is to kind of keep it as simple as possible. And to me, there's two parts of this. There's the cultural part of it, of like, what is transparency in a business, right? I think we all saw Facebook or Meta, all their internal tracking of employees just got leaked, and they're like, I guess we're not going to do that anymore. Was it a good idea? But I think that's a cultural conversation that needs to happen. But to more of your question of like how to meet those requirements, you know, it's funny, the current inspiration I have, and yes, it's from today, but Claude just released a new feature called Claude Tags, or I think it's called
Mhm.
Tag. They're keeping it super simple. It's like the memory of whatever that Claude tag. And just for listeners, I will explain. Claude Tag is a brand new feature that Claude Anthropic rolled out. That is a new iteration of how Claude integrates with Slack, and it creates a per channel memory. And it's kind of a multiplayer way to use Claude within a conversation. The way that they've set it up is that every channel essentially gets its own memory. And I think that is a kind of key principle of how to start to look at role based access to memory itself. I think there's a lot of hard work to be done to manifest that in a business brain. How is an agent supposed to triage an email from a founder's inbox that's supposed to go to this memory versus that memory? There's a lot to kind of like tackle there. I am not a developer or an engineer. I'd like to surround myself with people who are smarter than me to answer those questions. But what's interesting is Google has like this organizational unit feature. And I've always tried to figure out how to use that feature. And I think that plus this concept of different memories for different organizational units or like for different channels, that is where it kind of becomes most relevant in terms of like user facing simplicity. However, on the back end, how you make sure that the conversations, I think actually in Slack, it's probably easiest. Like now I'm going off the top of my head, is if you have a leadership channel, that's a very easy thing to route
Mm-hmm.
into a leadership memory. However, emails are way harder and, that you will definitely require like a human in the loop.
Yeah.
It's yeah. So that's, I would probably say, my current hypothesis and the direction we're trending to try to figure out this. I'd love to hear your take on it though.
No, I think those are some really good thoughts. I do a lot of research on this almost daily now, where I'm searching for other people who have solved this, and I don't know that anyone solved it perfectly yet. So I think it's really an open problem out there that a lot of companies within the space of the company brain or business brain are actively working to solve on some level. The way that we're approaching it is structuring business information into different domains within a company. So marketing, sales, finance, leadership, creating these compartments, and maybe even down from that, a more complete schema. But these compartments become one way to govern that information. And then each person represents kind of ownership over their information. So, in an example of two people being on a meeting, the transcription now is smart enough to know who's talking. So, if it's Alex talking or Steven talking, those are attributed in the actual transcript in most cases. And so then the owner of those words essentially being recorded in that transcript would be attributed to whoever said them. And that being part of this memory governance is this idea of like whoever said it has ownership. There's maybe some other perspectives on that, like if a company is paying an employee for their time, maybe the company actually does own that information. But then you're still asking the question of like, if something was said in a meeting and they don't really want that to go into a memory within the brain, does that person have the right to kind of say, no, I don't actually want that added to the brain, where the leadership team has access to that? Or just kind of this idea of like, we want to create governance, but we don't want to package surveillance under this
Uh-huh.
label of
Uh-huh.
governance. So,
Uh-huh.
really trying to create a system where there is a human in the loop governance principle built into the core of what is being built, so that the systems actually operate in a way that kind of give that authority back to the humans that are actually saying these things or coming up
Uh-huh.
with these ideas.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's going to be a growing topic of governance versus surveillance as a whole. I think a lot of people have a lot of different opinions on it. Again, going back to the meta example, they're like, all your base belong to us. Like anything you do is ours, which is interesting. I think there needs to be, kind of going back to that culture point, I think there needs to be some sort of medium. From a business perspective, my gut here is that you don't need every single conversation. Like I do have a meeting recorder at almost every single conversation that I have, and it is so valuable. But
Hmm.
are there a lot of times where I'm saying we're turning off transcription? Yes.
Hmm.
And I have a client where we are not allowed to use any meeting transcription, and it drives me crazy because I have to take a lot of notes. But it is after using meeting note takers for so long, it's so kind of liberating
Hmm.
to like kick them out of the room. Where you're like,
Hmm.
oh, we can say anything. I think it's kind of like raising kids. You cannot control every situation that your kids are going to be in. My working model is that you try to instill all the best values for them to be able to handle as many situations as possible, right? But at a certain point, you kind of have to let them fail in some things, in a
Hmm.
lot of things. I don't know what kind of management style that is, but and that's where my gut goes of you have to let some folks just have some privacy, even if they're at work, even if they're on the clock. A lot of one-on-ones that I have, my direct reports, I do turn off the transcript and I'm like, hey, let's just chat. Like
Hmm.
I don't need that information to be stored anywhere in the business brain, but I'd love to hear your take on it.
Yeah, I think that's a strong perspective, and I hope that we are both building systems aligned with that perspective, because I think that's one of the interesting things I think about is that we have these LLMs out there now, and Anthropic, OpenAI, they're developing these core models, but I think the real human aspect comes in is companies like yours or mine or other ones who are building governed systems that companies will actually end up operating in. Like today's world, it's let's install Claude for a company and let's make Claude the best possible software we can for a company. That may not be the future. Claude is a general purpose software with a really powerful model underneath it, but that model API can be pulled into another software that's within a specific vertical, has specific agentic frameworks or tooling that's all specific to that business or that industry. And that becomes potentially the governed system that businesses work in. Or maybe, like you're saying, businesses are just developing their own software. But regardless of where, like, we end up 3-5 years from now, the people actually doing the building are going to be building in the principles of how humans are treated within that company. And I think companies will end up choosing systems where the engineers or the architects of those systems had that intention from day one, which is how do we build a system as a human first system that is, a powerful AI system at its core, but it's giving a lot of compute to human values and things that are important to us as we do our work and our mental health and all of that. Like it's even I'm thinking in terms of like analytics within an AI environment, how much compute power is actually going towards solving human problems versus just making profit? Like, can we eventually track those things of like how much of the LLM is spending time thinking about how to value humans and how to make a company environment that's truly, you know, a place where people can thrive versus just a place where profit is the only thing that the system is driving after. Do you
Yeah.
have any thoughts or perspective on that?
Not to go too far back, but one thing that kind of stuck out to me was kind of this notion of bias and how the system is built. Because, over the past 2.5 years, I've spent a lot of time trying to teach people how language models are biased. I don't think I've actually connected the dots to say how you build your business system is also inherently biased on the values that you have in the business either from the founder or the leadership team. For people that know me, I'm going to sound like a broken record, but I think at the end of the day, like the most important thing right now is just figuring out values and like what do you as an individual stand for, and what does your business stand for? Because we have the power to build so much, and this bias, your own bias, is noticeable everywhere, whether you like it or not. It's going to it your taste and how you influence a project, even how you do a quarterly report for your company, like, and it's all in Excel. Like, that's your taste, that's your bias. That's every accountant has a different style. When I talk about what's left, that's one of the more kind of important things that I talk to everyone about. And having that approach to taste and understanding what you like and don't like. And for some reason, I've never abstracted it to that level of the business system itself. But you brought it up in such a good way. On this topic of kind of what's left, we are in a very interesting position as kind of AI consultants. And I'd love to hear from you, from our point of view or from our kind of work point of view, if AI can do almost everything that we can do, and I'm sure you have a lot of skills and a lot of ways to expedite the delivery you do for your clients, what's left for you at the end of the day?
I know the work that I enjoy doing is strategic work and then bringing that back to kind of a human value system. And I think what's left in a world where AI systems are trained in a very specific way to do very specific things, and maybe they become even broader, more organic, more autonomous, and like they have this flexibility where like right now they're still pretty rigid in the way that we build them or how we utilize them. I think that having human judgment or even like critical thinking, like those type of skills, I don't want to lose those. No matter how much I work with AI, no matter how much AI takes over my job, I still want to be critical of AI's output and say, why did you make that decision? And then maybe even be critical of how transparent AI is actually being with me about why it made that decision, and being the person that will dig deeper to find out if these systems are really reliable, if they're really governed, and really being the person that maybe eventually helps with that process where even if AI takes over most of the work that I currently do, I think that human judgment and critical thinking and really digging deep into that reliability piece within the AI systems, that's where I hope I kind of end up if AI takes over a lot of the work that I'm currently doing.
I love that. Typically, that's my last question, but you struck a nerve. But it's a good nerve. A lot of people say that when you use AI, you actually start to lose your own critical thinking. I'll give you my perspective first, is that I actually find myself thinking much more holistically and critically than I ever have before when I'm working. But I'd love to hear your perspective. Do you think that your personal critical thinking has changed either direction?
I think it changes where I focus it. So maybe I'm more of a reviewer now than like the person who does all of the manual labor to create something. One of the phrases that I've come up with that I like using is you guide, AI builds, you decide. And it's kind of this human in the loop principle, but it's like I take authority and ownership over the direction and the goal. AI does the work, and then I take ownership over the judgment part at the end of the day. I still feel like I'm so excited by the work that I'm doing and even helping companies install AI. There's just so much of my daily work where I'm still thinking critically about how to make judgment calls about what's the right way to implement AI into a company or what systems we're using. There's just so much that I'm currently problem solving that I feel like I'm probably doing more problem solving, more strategic work than I was before. So yeah, I think if anything, I've probably increased the amount of problem solving and critical thinking I'm doing.
I love that. I love the you guide, AI builds, you decide. It's a great framework. I have a very similar one, but I've never had the you guide. I love that upfront thinking that really maps to research and planning and how we talk about it. Stephen, thank you so much. I love this conversation. I feel like we could keep talking for hours. I want to thank you for your time. Thank you for showing up. Thank you for sharing your honest thoughts. Is there anything that you want to kind of call out to the world and shout out or take notice, or where can people find you, and how can people help you today?
Yeah, I think these conversations are great. I really like all of your questions, your thoughts. Of course, you can always, visit the website, logostrategyco.com, just kind of understand what we're building with the business brain. But really, I think there's so much opportunity in this field for people who are doing it right that I think in the world of marketing now, it's more just about these honest conversations and really taking an approach where we're providing real value to companies and everything kind of builds from there. So these type of conversations are really enjoyable for me. I'm super happy that you were able to set this up and just invited me to have a conversation with you. So thanks a lot.
Of course. I'm looking forward to the next one. Stephen, thank you so much for your time.
I'm Alex Lee. I run Casca AI, and over the past 2 years, I've had a front row seat to how real people and businesses are adopting and shifting. Every episode, I bring in someone who's in the trenches, founders, engineers, operators, owners, and we have a real conversation about navigating AI's impact in their own profession. This is What's Left.